Welcome to the joint Manhattan Borough President and Comptroller Forum of the Four Freedoms Democratic Club, Lexington Democratic Club, Tilden Democratic Club, and the Illinois Roosevelt Democratic Club. I may have gotten some of the clubs' names a little wrong, but I think I've communicated who they are.
Independent Democrat.
Independent. And we are going to be on a very tight schedule tonight. I'm Jerry Ferguson, President of the Four Freedoms. We're an active, progressive, and fun club on the upper side.
Hi there, Mike Portman, District Leader for the Eleanor Roosevelt Independent Democrats, 74th Assembly District, parts B and D, basically everything from 14th Street north into 74th, outside of Sidetown and Waterside.
Good evening, Howard Sanders, President of the Lexington Democratic Club, and hi, Mom. And then outside, right outside here is our voting. We're doing voting tonight, our endorsement vote, and it will be open from now until 30 minutes after all the forums end tonight. So if you're a part of the club, that's where you go to vote. Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Faith Bondi. I'm the president of the San Jose Tilden Democratic Club. We are also the 74th Assembly District, Part C, which is the rest of side is in town and over by East Midtown Plaza. And we are from the Democratic Club, and we've been in existence 72 years. So thank you for coming tonight on this.
One more administrative piece. Four Freedoms members, make sure you register with Gabe if you want to vote. And then Mike, you want to start off the program? We've said this to candidates before, but they have 4 minutes to make introductory remarks, 8 minutes to answer questions that have been submitted in advance. We're going to read them from the podium. And John Wagner is going to be the time enforcer of death to make sure we stay on schedule.
So we're going to get started in the race for Manhattan Borough President. Our first candidate is State Senator Brad Hoylman-Sigal. Senator Hoylman-Sigal has represented the 47th Senate District since 2013, chaired a Judiciary Committee in the Senate. Prior to that, was a district leader and community board chair on the West Side and president of the Gay and Lesbian Independent Democrats. Please welcome State Senator Brad Hoylman-Sigal.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. As was said, I'm State Senator Brad Hoylman-Sigal. Really honored to be here. Thank you for this great turnout. I'm running for Manhattan Borough President. I want to tell you a few things about what my background is, my record in the New York State Senate, and what I plan to do. I live in the village with my 2 young daughters, age 7 and 14, and with my husband. We've lived there for 30 years. I got involved in local politics on a block association and as a district leader, and have been there ever since. My district spans from Christopher Street, home of the historic Stonewall Inn, birthplace of the contemporary LGBTQ civil rights movement, all the way up to West 103rd Street, or as my team likes to say, from the gay bars to Zay bars. And I have passed 363 bills in the New York State Senate, proud to say the most of any legislator in either house last session. But my 14-year-old reminds me, Daddy, it's about quality, not quantity, and she's not wrong. She's not wrong about that. But I think I've passed bills that have a real impact on the lives of New Yorkers and Manhattanites specifically. One, I have passed a bill to expand the number of hate crimes that can be charged by a factor of 20. I've also fought to ensure that chopper noise is restricted in Manhattan at the West 33rd Street heliport. I have fought to keep tenants in their homes by passing groundbreaking legislation called the Tenant Safe Harbor Act that prevented tenants from being evicted during COVID. All tenants were protected. And I'm proud to be part of the panoply of legislators, including our home senator here, Liz Krueger, to fight for the rent laws of 2019 that dramatically transformed the dynamic between tenants and landlords. What I want to do as Borough President is build on that. First, I want to create a Manhattan Tenants Union to organize tenants across the borough This is particularly important because we now have good cause eviction protection.
Yes, I'm on
Those
this.
tenants who are in non-regulated apartments. Two, as a parent of two young children, I want to create something I'm calling the Public School Parent Advocacy Center. I have a 14-year-old with dyslexia. It took us until fourth grade to figure out she had dyslexia. I passed a bill in Albany that requires private health insurance to cover the neuropsychological exams for kids with dyslexia. That is saving parents between $5,000 and $15,000 a pop. I want to make it easier for parents, particularly low-income parents from underserved areas, to have their kids apply for middle and high school. If you're a parent, feel free to raise your hand. You know how difficult it is to understand the Byzantine nature of our public school system. And finally, you know what? We need a professional real estate analyst in the borough president's office. Too many times, as a former community board chair, as was said, as somebody who's been on a community board for 10 years, I have the scars to show it, that, you know, we don't know how much a developer is in fact making from a project. We don't know what it means to build affordable. We don't know what should be the definition of affordability. Those are some of my ideas. I'd be so honored to serve as borough president. I have the endorsement of 10 elected officials across Manhattan, including Congressman Dan Goldman and Jerry Nadler, as well as a panoply of assembly members and city council members, including Assemblywoman Grace Lee, State Senator Brian Kavanaugh, Assembly Member Deborah Glick, Assembly Member Micah Lasher and Linda Rosenthal and Tony Smo, and former borough president and current council member Gail Brewer and former borough president Ruth Messinger. I'd be honored to have your vote tonight and especially on June 24th. I can't be, let me say this, if I can't be your first choice, let me be your second, which shouldn't be too hard because there's only two people in the vote. Thank you very much.
Just so that our folks at home can see you on the equipment, just move to this side of the mic stand. Thank you.
I was walking out of camera.
I was watching, you were fine, but it's just better here. Thank
So
you.
Senator, first question, how do you plan to tackle the increase in homelessness and drug addiction in our borough?
It is an enormous problem. Needless to say, I think we have to be vigilant and focused on building more housing. That's easier said than done, and that is a long-term horizon to build housing, but we can have it by to convert current office buildings into housing. I think we need to be mindful of the fact that it is often hard to build affordable housing, and we have to bring in private developers. Let me say this, I will not support, as borough president, development on city or state-owned property that doesn't begin with the premise of 100% affordable housing. We can do that through a few things. One, we need to have nonprofit developers at the table. The city has abandoned that. They bring in the private developers, and of course, what do the developers think? Which is why I think we need a real estate analyst. How much profit are we making from this deal? We need to think differently and actually go back to the 80s during Ed Koch, when frankly, over 20,000 affordable units were built by nonprofit developers across the 5 boroughs. Secondly, I really strongly support an idea that's been germinating in Albany to have a revolving loan fund, either backed by the state and or the city, so that we can bond out the creation of affordable housing. Listen, folks, in Albany, we bonded out over $1 billion for a football stadium in Buffalo. I voted against it. I spoke on the floor against it. My colleagues voted in support, not Senator Kruger, for the record. I think that there is a lot of potential in bonding authority to build affordable. And then finally, as a friend of mine recently wrote in an article, which I highly recommend, "It's the subway stupid." That was the title of his article. We don't feel safe on our subways. If we don't get homeless folks into treatment, and I got a plan in Albany to help do that, we're gonna lose this battle because folks, there are fellow New Yorkers suffering every day on the platforms and our city blocks due to homelessness, addiction, and mental illness. We have to get it right. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator, next question. Will you support a ban on the e-scooters in parks and also licensing and registration of e-bikes and e-scooters.
Thank you. Yes to number one. To number two, I have legislation in Albany to require all e-bikes that are used for commercial purposes to be licensed. Assemblymember Simone and I sponsor that. I worked with your local Assemblymember Alex Flores, and we actually passed, I think it may have been the only bill in Albany last session that was directed at the explosion of motorized scooters and mopeds that are making deliveries. Since our bill passed, and I think there's been a difference, our bill requires that scooters, gasoline-powered mopeds, cannot be taken out of retail establishments without having been registered first with the New York State Department of Motor Vehicles. I think that's made a difference because no longer can you go into a retail establishment, buy a moped, and take it out on the road. You've got to get licensed first. Why is that important? And I think your question holds that premise, which is, if you're gonna have enforcement for these crazy scooters on sidewalks going up, you know, the wrong way on the street, you need to have enforcement that is signified by license plates, and that's what it boils down to. So I've got my bill that I carry with Assemblymember Simone, and I have the bill to register all commercial e-bikes. We also have to work with the app delivery companies. They are making millions of dollars off of our public infrastructure and not contributing a dime. Also important to that debate and that discussion, we need to have the e-bike delivery drivers insured. Michael Miller, a local rabbi, got hit by an e-bike, hit and run, which is appalling. There was no insurance for him if it had been like it might have been if it's been a vehicle. So that is another effort on my part that I'm working with Assemblywoman Linda Rosenthal on.
Thank you, Senator. The next question from our members is, the city adopted Vision Zero policies 10 years ago to eliminate death and serious injuries caused by motor vehicles, but not enough gains have been made. What will you do to move forward Vision Zero goals with respect to both public safety and livable streets?
Well, thank you for that. I am heartsick when I hear about the deaths or injuries of New Yorkers, Manhattanites. Let me say, this is deeply personal for me. My former chief of staff, I think many of you might know him, was hit by a car while riding an e-bike in Brooklyn. He's in a rehabilitated facility in California where he's with his family, thank goodness. But his future is extremely uncertain. I fought in Albany for legislation that I authored, again with Assemblywoman Rosenthal, called Sammy's Law, named after a 12-year-old who was just 3 months short of his bar mitzvah, struck by a car. So what did we do? We allowed New York City Council specifically, to lower speed limits on side streets. Believe it or not, in Albany, there had been a mandatory minimum for speed limits. And we lowered that, and now New York City has the flexibility. So I will fight to ensure that our streets and speed limits are safer. And there's a whole package in Albany, and I know there's one at the city council, but I've been a staunch ally of Families for Safe Streets and other groups that have been advocating for that. You shouldn't have to fear for your life when you go across the street, whether an older New Yorker or a kid or someone, pushing a baby carriage.
Thank you very much. Okay, the next speaker.
Oh, that's it?
Yeah, it's on.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you for your consideration. On to the next one, I'm sure all three council member powers there. Thank you so much.
Thank you much. Our next candidate and speaker is council member of City Council District 4. He Keith Powers. That district covers Manhattan's East Side and Midtown. He's currently chair of the City Council Rules, Privileges, and Elections Committee. Thank you. Keith Powers.
Thank you. I agree with Senator, you can rank him too. I agree with that. Listen, I'm so humbled to be with you, and thank you to our clubs, our amazing East Side clubs. I used to be district leader for Eleanor Roosevelt. I know how much goes into these forums. I know how much work it is to organize these. So thank you to our leadership, congratulations to our new president, and thank you to our folks. Give them all a big round of applause for putting it together. So I'm City Council Member Keith Powers, and I have been very humbled over the last 8 years to be the City Councilor representing the east side of Manhattan. I'm probably the City Councilor representing many of the people in this room, and if not, I've been working on issues that affect you and impact you here on the east side. That is because I'm a lifelong native east sider myself. As many of you know, I grew up in Stuyvesant County, Cooper. And when I got my start in politics, I actually started working for State Senator Liz Kruger, but I actually left to go organize penance in Stuyvesant Town in 2006 when our neighborhood was getting sold. And we had to get together and band together to save our neighborhood from the most difficult circumstances of someone coming in and trying to take away our long standing rent regulation rights and to exploit loopholes and to essentially evict people that are my friends and family members from our longstanding neighborhood. And when I did that, I could see the impact of local government on the lives of many of us here on the east side. And when we get to work as east siders, as tenants, as elected leaders, as people standing up for our communities, how much power there is and how much political power matters to that equation. And I went on to serve as the chief of staff for Senator Jonathan Bing, which many of you probably represent, was Alex Boras's predecessor by 2. And then in 2017, I faced the possibility of running for city council. And the reason I ran for city council is the same reason I got into politics in the first place. I think city and state government has a tremendous impact on the ability to change our lives and to do good for people in our communities. And one of the first things that we did when I got into office is we went and used our land use powers that the borough president has to help out 400 senior citizens from losing their homes in Waterside Plaza. And then we turned to places like Stuyvesant Town, and we saved 6,000 people from losing rent stabilization. And we stood up for our unhoused New Yorkers to make sure that they have a place to live here on the east side. And then we worked on a tremendous amount of issues like fighting climate change. I got a 100% rating for the New York League of Conservation Voters for my work to lower emission standards in our city fleets, to be the champion for composting and recycling citywide in our city, to fight for investments, millions of dollars of parks right here on the east side, to protect our waterfront from the next superstorm that would actually flood our neighborhoods. And I lived through Superstorm Sandy to make sure we never have to do that again. And I've championed common sense solutions inside the city council to boost our neighborhoods, whether it's tackling the noise pollution that takes up too much of our time here and keeps us up late at night. I've been championing against tackling scaffolding to help save our small businesses and improve public safety. I've taken on the quality of life and the public safety issues I think so many of us hold near and dear, because this is my community too. And I want to make sure for the long-term future it is safe, it is affordable, it is vibrant, it is a place that all of us want to raise families and continue to live in. And I'm very proud of my record. And I was proud when I first ran to carry many of your support. I am here humbly asking for your support again as I run for borough president. I'll talk a little bit about what I plan to do with that. But the number one thing for me is lowering the cost of living and making sure we have safe, livable, vibrant neighborhoods. And if we do not attack the cost of living, we do not have a future here as east siders. So I focus my work in the city council on housing and protecting tenants and building more housing so we can lower the cost of housing. And that will be one of my primary focuses as the next borough president for Manhattan. I would love to have your support, and I should add, I am so lucky to carry so many support leaders in this room, the district leaders, the club presidents who have seen me do the work here on the ground, and will continue to do that work as borough president.
Thank you. Hey,
How do you plan to ensure that Manhattan schools remain a safe place for trans and non-binary students?
Thank you for that. I just left NYU Langone Hospital, where we put together a press conference to, as elected officials, I represent NYU Langone, I was born in NYU Langone actually, and to make sure that they knew what we think they're doing right now is totally against our values. It is complicit with the Trump administration's policies, and to make sure that as a city that is supposed to be a safe haven, that we are actually living up to our values. And I will tell you right now, that is going to be the first but not the last fight we're going to have either in the east side or in New York City when it comes to standing up for our trans New Yorkers and our neighbors and our friends, but also for other vulnerable communities too. And if we do not, as a city in a blue state, as a blue city, demonstrate our ability to stand up and to be the fortress against the Trump administration, we are failing as New Yorkers. And I am so proud of our Attorney General, who I think is fighting this fight on the front lines. I am here to support her. And as Borough President, I will make sure that whether it's our school system or our healthcare institutions or anywhere in the city that is a safe place for every New Yorker. Right now, our school system is a place that I was proud to stand up to speak out against CEC District 2 policies that I think went after the trans community. I will continue to use my voice. As somebody who will point people to the CEC and the PEP, I will make sure that the path of education policy, I will make sure my appointments also carry the strong values that I carry as an elected official.
Thank you.
Council member, against the backdrop of a historic housing crisis, do you think the ULURP process needs to be reformed? And how will you work to bring down rents in Manhattan?
Thank you. There's a couple ways we can bring down rents, and I'll talk about some very practical ones with a long-term solution too. Number one is we have to attack any policy that allows for displacement or eviction in the city. And when I talked about my record in Waterside Plaza, what essentially was happening there was seniors were they exited the Michelano program. They were losing the ability to afford their rents after that. And I actually used the land use process, a small rezoning that we were doing for Waterside Plaza as a way to actually bring in affordability. So I said, we're not going to do this rezoning and this lease renewal for the property on city-owned property unless we actually lower the rents for the longtime residents who are now facing steep rent increases. So that's number one. We have tools at our disposal that we can use when there is in the middle of a housing crisis to make sure that people already have good housing, get to keep it. We took affirmative litigation in Stuyvesant Town when there was a question about the status of 6,000 units. And we took the landlord to court and we won, and we clarified the law to protect 6,000 residents in Stuyvesant Town and many more city and statewide against deregulation. So that's number one. Number two is I do believe we have to build housing in many different places all throughout the city. We have to ask every single neighborhood to contribute to solving the housing crisis. And I was proud to champion that in the city council and be one of those vocal supporters for making sure that every community carries the burden. That includes whether it's solving for homelessness and solving for housing, making sure our communities roll up their sleeves and are part of that solution. Number three is we have some practical solutions that stand right in front of us. We have a Midtown South rezoning that I've been championing, which would allow underutilized, outdated office buildings to convert to housing with affordable housing inside of it. You don't even have to build new buildings. You can actually convert the buildings that are right in front of you. I've been the champion of that in the city council because I believe that area is a great place for housing and affordable housing, close to schools, transit, and much more. And I believe we have to use tools like that to make sure we build housing. We do it in places like Manhattan, which are prime opportunities. We also have publicly owned sites. I have a program I'm calling libraries to living rooms, where you can actually take some of our public libraries that they're doing uptown, and you can rebuild those libraries with housing on top of them. And there's a great example, 800 units uptown, that if I'm borough president, I probably will have to weigh in on, and I support, which would actually allow us to modernize our public facilities, while also building housing. We have an opportunity to do that in Kips Bay as well, right outside of my district. I think those are good opportunities, and to continue to look at our public sites, while also looking at making sure that in our private development that we are also asking for high amount of affordable housing that is meaningfully affordable to many people here on the east side. As borough president, we have the tools to do that. We have land use and rezoning powers, we have community board appointments, we have a city planning appointment that's essential to Manhattan's representation. And of course, we have bullet appointment to do all that. So I plan to do all that as borough president.
Thank you. Next question is, should there be term limits on community board members, and why or why not?
Yes, I have heavily debated this. I used to be a community board member, and look, of course, I like to believe that we have a natural rotation of community board members through this process. I am been skeptical at times of the community board term limit process for the purposes of, you're asking, in our community boards, we have a lot of applicants, but many other community boards do not. And so in certain areas of the city, you really need people who want to be on the community board to stay there. So I've always been a bit skeptical, but I sort of been maybe between, if I'm being quite honest of it. What I do think is important is that when we bring on a whole new wave of city community board members, which is going to happen in the next few years, the community boards are going to change over. We are going to make sure that number one, we have to recruit the best people to serve on those boards. I propose doing that in a non-political, independent way. I think we should take the politics out of the community board and put people on merit with an independent process to do that. We have 2 minutes left. We should recruit people we should have diverse boards. We should make sure they are representative of the city and the communities we live in. We should make sure they're geographically diverse as well. But also we have to train those people. And as borough president, one of my tasks is going to be to make sure we recruit and train the best people to serve on our community boards, regardless of term limits or not. And we are going to make sure that members who have served on these boards, we also find other opportunities for them to be civically engaged, because we don't want to lose that talent. We don't want to lose that brain trust either.
Seven, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so.
What will you do to increase focus on the concerns of Roosevelt Island residents who often feel overlooked by our officials?
Yes, thank you. Who's here from Roosevelt Island?
Maybe
Well, already represented, I mean,
People online.
look, I grew up in what I consider a very special place, a very neighborhood within a neighborhood, and I would say that about Roosevelt Island, I feel like they are. Number one, it's like the transportation concerns and representation around transportation there, which is always an issue. Committee board was just talking about the tram, the overcrowding situation, so I've been watching that as well. Oh, I will be on Roosevelt Island holding town halls once a year. I promise that. I'll make sure the community board appointments that are on Roosevelt Island, that feels necessary as we're doing our process of appointing people. I will have a representative in my office dedicated to talking to the folks and representing Roosevelt Island. And of course, I need to be there and present. I will make sure I'm there present at all times and holding my office, some office hours there and town halls there frequently.
Thank you.
Okay.
Do we have time? Is that time?
I think we don't have time for
Wagner's pulling the. Well, anyway, I would just finish with thank you guys for having me tonight. I so humbly ask for your support as I launch out here for Borough President. I hope to see you on the campaign trail, and thank you for giving me a few minutes of your time tonight. Thank you.
Please up here if you want to sit down.
Just talking to people in the back, don't worry.
One of our controller candidates here? I don't see Mark or,
Yeah, Mark's running that late.
So next speaker, who is Borough President Mark Levine, running for Comptroller, is running a few minutes late. Just use this time to remind people that if you're a Four Freedoms member and you haven't registered yet with Gabe, make sure you do, so that you're going to get your vote by email. And for Lex Club members,
Yeah, where the table for voting is right outside. And once again, if you just walked in later, voting is going now. Endorsement votes with the candidates tonight. And it'll end 30 minutes after the forums end tonight. Thank you.
for Eleanor Roosevelt members that are in the room, don't worry, no pressure tonight. We're gonna be voting in a week. We have a meeting scheduled. You should have gotten an email about that, but it's gonna be at Strauss Houses, where we had our city council forum, and that's a week from today, on the 13th.
And Tilden members, we are not voting tonight. Our meeting is next Tuesday, the 11th, and we do not have an endorsement vote scheduled at that time either.
Yes, sir.
Question, there's a Calvin son on the list for Borough President.
that's a good question. In putting this forum together, it's very easy to register as a candidate, but we felt like it would be the best use of the members' time to require candidates to meet a certain threshold of financial fundraising, basically, according to the fundraising funds. It's a very low threshold. It's $50,000. If you're at all serious about this race, you probably would have raised that money by now. We invited the three candidates who meet that threshold. Calvin's son did not respond to our invitation, so he is going to be on the ballot of the Four Freedoms members, and perhaps also for the Lex Club, but we will not be hearing from him tonight. We will be hearing from the three Comptroller candidates, including the gentleman who just very suavely walked into the room. Mark, why don't you come on up? Wow. I'll go. So very briefly, Mark Levine, our current Manhattan Borough President, a former city council member from District 7 on the Upper West Side and Northern Manhattan, and here to talk to us tonight about his run for Comptroller.
Thank you, Mr. President. That's how you make an intro, all right? Well, I'm speaking to two of the most coveted Democratic Club endorsements.
Actually, about 4. Delano Roosevelt and Tilden also.
All 4 of you? This is high stakes. Honestly, the East Side packs way above its weight. You guys are a force for Democratic candidates up and down the ballot, and I'm so excited to tell you about my candidacy right now. In a very difficult moment, as we are 2.5 weeks in to a presidential administration that is every bit as cruel and chaotic as we warned, and we did warn that it would be bad. I believe that at this moment, local government and local politics, that's you, is more important than ever. And that is why I'm standing up to run to be the next New York City Comptroller. This is a position that I've been preparing for my entire career, as I've been fighting for New York City my entire career. Since I graduated from college with a physics degree and became a bilingual math and science teacher at junior high school 149 in the South Bronx, District 7. So many of my students and their families had no connection to the formal financial system. So I did something about it. I founded a community development credit union, basically a nonprofit, cooperatively owned bank in Uptown Manhattan. It's called Neighborhood Trust, still going strong. It's made $100 million in small loans to low-income families uptown, helping them do everything from buy a home computer, start a small business, even become owners of their own home. When I got to the city council in 2014, representing Washington Heights, West Harlem, a little bit of the West Side, 2014, this was the height of the eviction epidemic in New York City. Again, I did something about it. I introduced legislation making New York City the first place in America with a right to counsel for tenants facing eviction and housing court. We fought for 3 years against the full force of the landlord lobby. I didn't back down. We won that fight, and we have changed housing court forever in New York City. As chair of the City Council Health Committee, when I connected to many of you for the first time, I stood up for science, for good health policy, when that was not popular, and I incurred the wrath of the national right wing for it. I stood strong, and I'm still fighting for public health today. As borough president, I've stood up to the right again. Here in Manhattan, when radical right-wingers and CEC2 targeted our beloved trans kids, I denounced it, I called it out, and I'm calling it out now when it's coming from the White House. This is who I am. I stand up to powerful forces. I've also focused on quality of life issues with all of you, fighting to tear down unnecessary scaffolding and open more public bathrooms and plant 1 million more trees and build more affordable housing throughout this borough. This is the record of fighting and winning I will take into the role of New York City Comptroller. I will use pension money consistent with the fiduciary responsibility of the office to finance affordable housing that might not otherwise be built. I will use the powers of audit and investigation to ensure accountability in agencies like HPD and NYCHA and the schools on behalf of New Yorkers. I will fight to fund a broken mental health system, which has left Bellevue Hospital with only 19 extended care beds. There's a direct connection to this and the crisis we're seeing on the streets. We can do this. We can make New York City more affordable for everybody. We can make New York City safer and healthier for everybody. We can restore confidence in local government, in democratic leadership. We can fight back against the Trump agenda, and that's why I'm running to be the next New York City Comptroller. Thank you.
So you'll know we're getting questions that were submitted in advance, from, the representatives of the different clubs up on this table right now, and Faith, if you'll start us out.
Yeah, so your first question is, how do you strike a balance between ensuring the best returns and not supporting businesses that harm New York and the New York City pension funds?
Yeah, I don't know if people realize how big the New York City pension fund is. It's like $280 billion, okay? This is not a small piece of the American economy. The first mandate of the office is to protect the retirement assets of people who serve the city, including many of you, and hopefully me one day. So we don't deviate from that. Having said that, we want to make sure that those funds are invested consistent with our values. And that is also often consistent with financial prudence. That is true of divesting from fossil fuel companies in the midst of an existential climate crisis and shifting those investments to green technology, both the moral thing to do and also financially prudent. This is the balance we need to strike. And when I talk about investing in affordable housing, I apply the same standard. Of course, we're not going to take undue risk, but I've gone deep on this. And there are projects in New York City not being financed today that we could get across the finish line with pension money in a way that would still guarantee the safety and soundness of our retiree savings. This is going to be the balance I will strike as comptroller. Thank you.
So, Borough President, the next question is, you mentioned divesting from fossil fuel companies. As of May of last year, the New York City pension funds held more than 3 million shares of Tesla stock. Would you also support divesting from companies like that who have CEOs that are against our values and expand upon that?
Well, at a minimum, I would use the full force of shareholder power, which is considerable. We own a piece of essentially every company in America and many globally. And that means that we are shareholders in these companies. And I will use that power to demand through shareholder action, accountability, to make sure that companies don't reverse commitments to things like diversity and equity and inclusion under pressure from the Trump administration, that we make sure that companies don't reverse a commitment to uplifting trans Americans and New Yorkers in the face of opposition from the federal government. We can do this, and I will use shareholder power, and yes, in some cases, divest if no options remain to us.
All right, thank you. Next question. As you know, the cost of living in New York City is incredibly high. The median rent for a one-bedroom apartment in Manhattan exceeding $4,500 a month. As controller, what would you do to make housing cheaper across the 5 boroughs and in our neighborhood specifically?
Yeah. I mean, those numbers are mind-blowing. At those rents, you're not just hurting people making minimum wage who can definitely not afford Manhattan anymore. And they're winding up in homeless shelters in some cases. But you're also pricing out bus drivers and social workers and nurses at those rents. This threatens the future of Manhattan and New York City. You know, I've been all in on the fight to fix this. We've got to build more housing, and we've got to build more affordable housing. And the Comptroller has many tools that I will deploy to achieve that. I've talked about investing pension funds in building new housing. We also have a lot of housing that's currently affordable that is threatened with expiring out of programs like Mitchell-Lama or HUD 202. And the pension funds can be used to finance an extension on that for affordability. I've talked about how proud I am of establishing a program for right to counsel for tenants in housing court. But what I didn't mention is it's underfunded today. And there are tenants facing eviction every day in New York City who do not have a lawyer because legal aid programs don't have contracts sufficient to the scale of the need. I will use the power of the Comptroller's office, both a voice on the budget and a voice in the contracting project to ensure that never again does any tenant face an eviction in New York City without their right.
When you talk to non-politically motivated people on the streets, you often get comments about and complaints about the delivery of public services in New York, particularly in relation to the tax burden in New York City. What would you do to address those concerns?
Man, city government needs to be modernized. You know, there are literally fax machines in use in the New York City government. And you can go through any agency and you can see a mind-numbing level of bureaucratic obstacles that impact outcomes, right? You want to build affordable housing in New York? Add 18 months to the timeline for the paperwork to be approved at HPD. That's how long it takes them to do the loan documents. That is leaving families in a homeless shelter 18 months longer. That process could and should be modernized. You want to apply for food stamps in New York City? You got to go through a process of PDS and pull down menus, and there are 250,000 people in New York City who qualify for food stamps and do not receive it. What if you could just talk to your smartphone in plain English, or plain Spanish, or plain any language, and qualify for those benefits? Federal money coming to New York, helping people feed their families, and also good for supermarkets, be a win for New York. I can go through every agency. The job of the comptroller is also to audit program deliverables, it's called a performance audit. And I will not just look after the dollars and cents, I'll ensure that agencies are producing for the New Yorkers in need. I'm all in on this, I have a technical background, you've heard about that. I have a financial background, you've heard about that. I will deploy the powers of the office to ensure we spend money wisely, to ensure we give services that are of the highest quality, and that we bring city government into the 21st century.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's not a good question.
Dave?
What is your position on the city's efforts to move city retirees to a Medicare Advantage plan?
Yes. Well, the comptroller actually has a role in this, because every single contract in New York City has to be approved and certified by the comptroller. And I want to tell you, I believe firmly that people who work for New York City and serve New York City should not have healthcare they were promised denied in their retirement years. And I would not certify a contract unless it lived up to that guarantee. 45 seconds.
You
wanna-
Okay.
Okay.
45 seconds?
Yeah, 30 seconds.
I want to.
Closing comment.
Okay, I want to speak to you as fellow Democrats right now. After what has been a brutal 2.5 weeks, I know there's a temptation to want to curl up and just ride out the storm and pray it gets better. We can't do that. We have to denounce this guy when he attacks immigrants. We have to denounce this guy when he goes after trans people. We have to denounce him when he tries to take away reproductive rights. We need to be out there and loud and aggressive and bold, because the other side is. Not wait for the congressional race of 2 years. We need to be fighting right now, and our election in New York City is a chance to do that. We need to elect Democrats up and down the ballot, who are gonna fight that agenda and fight for New York City, and that's why I'm running to be your comptroller. Thank you.
We'll move quickly to our next speaker.
Oh, no.
Who has another commitment to get to, so we'll start now. Vic, if you can do the introduction.
Yes, so our next speaker is City Council Member Justin Brannan, who is also running for Comptroller. Councilmember Brannan represents District 47 in Brooklyn, and he is chair of the Finance Committee and sits on a number of other committees in the council, and he is joining us by Zoom.
Okay.
Justin, can you say something just so we can make sure we hear you in the room?
Sure, check 1, 2. Hello, Kim. Hi.
Hi, we hear you. Thank you.
Cool. Should I start?
For an introduction, followed by questions.
Cool. Thank you so much. Thank you to all the clubs for putting this together tonight. And obviously, thank you for allowing me to participate on Zoom. There's like 95 forums tonight, which is great and a good sign of a strong democracy. But I appreciate you accommodating me. I'm Councilman Justin Brannan, currently chair of the council's Finance Committee, where I oversee the largest municipal budget in the country at $115 billion. I didn't have a very conventional path to politics. I spent about 10 years touring the world as a professional musician. I learned 3 chords in public middle school, and that afforded me a career as a touring musician. And now I fight really hard to get more arts and music funding in our public schools because of that experience. Look, the next 4 years are going to be really tough. The way that we build a firewall around the city of New York is by how we spend our money. That $115 billion budget is going to be how we take care of each other, how we look out for each other. We're talking a lot about the cost of living and the affordability crisis that's gripping the city of New York. We can't just sit on our hands while the city spirals out of reach for working families. We need to do something about it. And what I believe is that $115 billion budget, that's the sharpest tool we have to bring down the cost of living for New Yorkers. If we invest in the programs and priorities that make life easier for New Yorkers, Then we bring down the cost of living. I'm talking about early childhood education. I'm talking about getting serious about universal childcare. I'm talking about investing in our parks, in our public schools, in our libraries, in CUNY, in arts and music education, in arts and cultural institutions. These are the things that I fight for now as chair of the Finance Committee. When the mayor tried to make cruel cuts to our budget, blaming the migrant crisis and saying that the city was going to go bankrupt because of the migrants, we all knew it wasn't true, and we proved him right. We proved him right and said, look, all the cuts that you made weren't necessary in the first place. We fought back and we won on many, many of those cuts. So I want to serve as controller because I think the next 4 years are going to be super crucial to the city, to the country, and having someone in that office who knows the budget better than anybody else and will fight like hell to make sure that every dime makes life easier for working people is why I'm best suited for the job.
Yeah, okay. Councilmember, thank you for joining us. As of May of 2024, the New York City pension funds held more than 3 million shares of Tesla stock. Given Elon Musk's illegal government incursion, would you support divestment from Tesla in the pension funds, and similarly with other companies that have similar issues?
A great question, Mike. Thank you. I would absolutely consider that. I don't think we should be playing politics with our pension funds. However, we should not be investing in folks that are trying to undermine and destroy the fabric of our democracy. So any investments in anything related to Elon Musk, we should seriously reconsider immediately.
Thank you. Just 1 second.
Okay, next question. What will you do to ensure city government doesn't overspend?
It's a great question as well. So one of the things that we fight really hard for in the city council is transparency, and also making sure that these colossal city budgets for some of these agencies, that there's more accountability with something called a unit of appropriation. It's a really wonky term, but basically it helps us understand better how these big budgets break down, to better itemize, line items on different budgets, to better understand, how this money is getting spent. Look, it's important. My number one, my mission as controller and as finance chair right now is to make sure that we're spending our money wisely and efficiently, and that taxpayers are seeing a return on their investment. And that comes down to making sure that these agencies are spending without waste, that we're doing audits to root out waste and to find money to fund the priorities that's going to make life easier for working families. We can't, we have a record. We have record reserves right now in the city. We have almost $8 billion in reserves, and that's due to good forecasting and good revenue forecasting on the side of the city council, certainly not on the side of the mayor. But look, I'm going to be a bulldog on oversight and accountability. We have record reserves. Our economy is strong. We just have a mayor right now who, frankly, he doesn't know what he's doing, and he's lying about the migrant costs, and he's putting people in a really tough place, not unlike our president with this chaos and cruelty theater that we're seeing.
Thank you. What are your plans for improving government oversight and efficiency?
So one of the things we need to do is we really need to dig in on the calcified bureaucracy in a lot of these agencies, not only because it's frustrating and it drives New Yorkers crazy, but because it's costing us a lot of money because of this dysfunction. There's a price tag on doing nothing. And as someone who worked for the Department of Education, I can certainly appreciate that education department with a $35 billion budget. I don't know a public school teacher in this town who would tell you that they feel like they're working with a $35 billion budget in their classroom, or that we're seeing the outcomes that we need to see in our public school kids. But I see the office as not just financial audits, but also managerial audits. I want to get into the flow charts of these agencies to better understand and to chip away at the rust and the redundancy in some of these agencies. I want to do performance audits. I want to take a look at what programs are working, what programs aren't working. And let's be real. Let's be real about what's working and what's not. And let's double down on what works, and let's stop doing what's not working. It's pretty simple.
The city has been notoriously slow in paying nonprofits that are contracted to perform vital services for the city. What will you do to ensure that nonprofits who rely on these contracts are paid in a timely manner?
Thank you so much for that question. This is something that is very, very near and dear to my heart as someone who chaired the contracts committee in my first term, as someone who worked for a nonprofit and appreciates the incredibly crucial and critical work that our nonprofits do. The fact that our nonprofits, the fact that a fly-by-night, no-bid contractor like DocGo can get a blank $400 million check written to them, meanwhile, our nonprofits are waiting years to get paid, is absolutely criminal. When the mayor was first elected, a couple of months after he was elected, he cleared out about $6 billion in back payments, owed payments to nonprofits. So it's clear that if this administration wanted to do it and wanted to do the right thing, they could. But they have ADD, unfortunately, and they don't focus on anything for more than 10 minutes. I've got a bill in the city council that would put the city of New York on the hook for the interest on loans that these nonprofits take out while they're waiting to get paid. This would absolutely make the city pay their bills on time because they're not going to want to pay the interest on those loans. I've never got a call faster from OMB than when they saw that bill and they were begging me for mercy. I said, fine, let's sit down and let's figure this out, because what's going on right now and the way that we're treating our nonprofits in this city is absolutely unacceptable and it's criminal. And we got to do the right thing and pay these guys on time. That is going to be one of my top 3 priorities when I'm elected controller.
Still on time?
Yeah, 8 minutes left, or 4 minutes left.
Council member, what is your position on the city's efforts to move city retirees to a Medicare Advantage plan?
I do not support it. I fight against it. You know, I have a sort of unique perspective on this because the Office of Management and Budget came to us 3 years ago and said, we've got a way to save $600 million a year. I said, okay, let's hear it. I'm all ears. Then they told us about Medicare Advantage, and I said, forget about it. We're not doing it. But the fact is this, for the past 3 years, we've been putting that $600 million in the budget every year. I've fought to make sure that that money is in the budget so our retirees can keep the health care that they have right now. I have many people in my family, including my own mom, who's a retiree. There is no way that I'm going to sell these people out. Retirees help build our city. They were promised health care when they were hired. And decades later, that's a covenant that needs to be respected. If you want to talk about changing healthcare for someone that starts work for the city on Monday morning, that's a different story. But you cannot change healthcare for our retirees. And frankly, there is no reason that we need to do that, because for the past 3 years, the city has been, as they're fighting these lawsuits, they're still paying to keep the insurance the way it is. Therefore, we don't need Medicare Advantage in the first place.
Thank you. Next question is, as you know, the cost of living in New York City is incredibly high. The median rent for a 1-bedroom apartment in Manhattan exceeding $4,500 a month. As controller, what would you do to make housing cheaper across the 5 boroughs and in our neighborhoods specifically?
Thank you so much. Great question. First and foremost, we have to make sure that anything that's built on public land is 100% affordable. Anything that's built on any kind of city or state-owned land is 100% affordable. We also have to be building housing at all income levels. We have a very basic supply and demand problem in the city. We've got more people that want to live in the city than we have places for them to live. And we've got to solve for that. But we don't do it by steamrolling communities and ignoring the input of communities. I want to leverage pension funds to build more. I've got a plan to build housing for New York City workers. I want to dream big again and get back to the days of places like Stuytown and Co-op City in the Bronx and Electchester and Mitchell-Lama. We have to dream big again. And what I want to make is a New York City housing plan for city workers. So talking about teachers, nurses, first responders, firefighters. I want to make sure that they also get pay raises. Right now, I'm fighting really hard to get our EMS workers a pay raise. These guys work some of the toughest jobs. They're street doctors. But when payday comes, they're treated very differently than their brothers and sisters in the uniformed services. Pension funds can be used to leverage these causes, but absolutely in bringing down the cost of living in the city of New York, building more housing for city workers is a great investment in our long-term economy. And we need working families to stay in New York City. If you listen to the New York Post, they're going to tell you that rich people are leaving the city. It's not true. Working families are leaving the city because they can't afford to live here. And I've been proud to be endorsed by TWU, the transit workers, as well as the sanitation men's union. These are city workers who believe in my vision and know that I'm going to fight like hell for them.
Do we have any time left?
Well, I think, if you want to make a very short, like 30 seconds closing statement, please feel free to do so, and we've appreciated hearing from you today.
Sure, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for having me. Look, I'm an Attleboro guy, and I fight like hell for everything, and that's what I'm used to. Very far away from City Hall out here in southern Brooklyn and Coney Island, and we have to fight for everything. But that's okay. I'm used to that. But it shouldn't be so damn hard to get by in the richest city in the world. We've got a $115 billion budget. I think we could be doing a lot better to make life more livable in this city. And I've got a lot of plans on my website to do it. I want to lift up our MWBEs. I want to make sure that we're disinvesting and divesting from money managers who invest in oil and gas. I want to make sure that we're getting our EMS workers a pay raise. I know that we all do better when we all do better. And I think over the next 4 years, you need a fighter in the controller's office who's going to build a firewall around that budget to make sure that Trump can't do damage to the city of New York.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So as may have been evident, we've been doing a little bit of a juggling act tonight. There's several forums going on at the same time. There's one more candidate we're going to be hearing from, Ishmael Malev, who's also running for comptroller. Some of you may have met him. He actually was here for the beginning of the meeting. He's speaking right now to the downtown clubs and is going to come on a Zoom with us in about 10 minutes. So I would, if you want to, I would kind of urge this, once we're going to start right at 8:10, or the time's going to start running at 8:10 because we need time for our own deliberations and that sort of thing. I would say if you're a Four Freedoms member, this is a very good time to make sure that you've received your OPA vote ballot by email and to let Gabe know if you haven't, to try and work that out. I don't know if anyone else has an announcement they want to make.
Yeah, once again, I don't think anybody new has come to the room, or maybe one or two people. But maybe a good time now, if you want to vote as a Flex Club member, you step outside, the table's out there. And then voting for Flex Club members will conclude 30 minutes after the end of the forum, which is after the next speaker goes. So that should be approximately before 9 p.m. Thank you. Hopefully.
And a reminder, there's no voting tonight for Tilden, but we do have a meeting on Tuesday in the community room at East Midtown Plaza. You should have received an email earlier today.
And there's also no voting for Eleanor Roosevelt Independent Democrats. Our endorsement meeting is a week from today.
It looks like Mr. Malev is not going to be able to join us. I hope you'll enjoy a little time to catch up. But I think we're now going to close the forum part of the meeting, and we're going to ask Four Freedoms members to stay in the room to have our internal debate and discussion. Everyone else is welcome to continue their discussions outside. And it's been great, great having these four clubs together for this club. I think it's been for this thing.
And once again, Lex Club, now that the forum's over, at 8:50, we're closing down the voting, 8:50. Thank you all. Stay home.
And thank you all the Tilden members who came up here in person from downtown. And thank you to everybody who was on it. It's been great to be together.
Okay, we're back.
All right, we're gonna announce the results. Okay, everybody's done it. Stop voting. erase all the ballots. I'm sure we're all really shocked by these results. Keith Powers and Mark Levine are our endorsement of this. With the exact same percentage too, but I won't
So-
tell you what that was.
See you all next Wednesday. Remember, we had to move it to Wednesday. I do think we're gonna have all the candidates there except the incumbent, but he hasn't been showing up for any of the forums. And, look forward to a lively discussion.
Thank you so much for your time, and thanks for joining us tonight.